This is TJ with Tech Made Easy. Welcome to the channel. My channel is all about making things affordable, practical, and easy. And what we're going to talk about today is I'm actually dumping Proxmox and I'm going with CasaOS. Why am I going with CasaOS? A couple of years ago I noticed Docker apps, and it was really hard for me to wrap my mind around Docker apps because there was so much setup to get some of these Docker apps going when I could just install an application, just hit install. And I was using my VM server as basically an application server. When I wanted to load up an app, I would spin up a Linux instance and run it in that Linux VM. Or I might run a couple in the Linux VM. I had maybe 5, 6 VMs going at a time. I wasn't really doing a lot of VMs. And the workstation server I was using was really overkill for what I was doing. It had 32 cores, 64 threads, 64 gigs of RAM. And so I downsized that as well. So I'm going to talk about what I was currently running with Proxmox and what I'm currently running now with Casa. And so when CasaOS came out and I saw how easy it was, if there was a Docker app in the Casa App Store, you just click install and it's done. You might have to go into the settings and maybe map where your data is, but fairly simple process to run Docker apps. And so I figured, you know what, I'm going to have a CasaOS server. I'll learn more in depth about Docker as I go along there, but I can get most of the apps that I run in the CasaOS App Store. So that's what I've done. But I'm also able to run VMs on there as well. Now, my Proxmox server was just serving as an app server. I was never running TrueNAS off of that. I do have 2 TrueNAS servers. One's a home business server, one's my video server. And I kept those separate. I didn't run those out of Proxmox, which you can do. That was just my preference. I think your file server should be separate from an app server. That's the most efficient way. I know that some people can't do that. That some home users having one server to serve all your files and your apps is optimal for them. So I started realizing that I could get away with just an app server with Docker and using Casa as my interface. If you're wondering why I didn't use ZemoOS, and if you don't know, ZemoOS and CasaOS, they're made by the same company. CasaOS is a standalone Docker server application. ZemoOS is a complete operating system. It gives you the Debian base along with CasaOS and gives you capability of creating RAID and setting up your Casa that way. I don't need a file server, so that's why I went with CasaOS. But ZemoOS is great. I have a video coming up on how to install it from the ground up on bare metal, set up your Docker apps, your RAIDs, all that kind of stuff. So that's why I'm going with Casa. So let's take a look at the apps that I am running and what I was running. Let's get started. Okay, like I'd mentioned in the intro, I downgraded my Proxmox server, but I'm going to show what I have here that I was using for Proxmox. Now, just so you know, I also have a file server. So anything that Proxmox was having to access was on my file server. And so, so what I had here is I had a Dell T7810. It's a dual workstation server. I had 2 E5 2698s in there, V3s, and that gave me 32 cores, 64 threads, 256 SSD for Proxmox and for storing ISOs on, 1 terabyte NVMe for VMs. Now, I realized later on that the 1 terabyte NVMe probably wasn't big enough. So you're going to notice on the system that I downgraded to, I do have more NVMe drive space. And I would suggest if you are doing Proxmox and you're going to run a lot of, say, different operating systems, stuff like that, make sure you have enough, or at least that you can add more as well. But let's take a look at the new system now. Now I want to explain that everybody has different needs when it comes to what applications are running, what VMs they're going to run, so on and so forth. Now, one of the reasons why I wanted so many cores is because I do rip a lot of Blu-rays and I use Handbrake to compress those for my video server. So I wanted to offload that to my Proxmox server, and it worked great. No complaints there at all. And then I run Plex, so I wanted to give Plex plenty of cores, but I realized after a while, now that streaming's so popular, I don't have as many people that use my Plex server, and so I don't need, and I probably didn't even need this beefy of a Proxmox server, to be honest.
for what I was doing. I was running another server on this as well, and I'll explain that later when we get into Casa, and I'm going to show the apps that I'm running. So I went ahead. I still wanted some power underneath the hood because I still wanted to offload compressing my files, my Blu-ray ripped images. So I went ahead and got this Dell 500 small form factor PC. It's got 48 gigs of RAM on it. It's got an i7 12700, and it's got 12 cores, 20 threads, and of course there's efficiency cores in there, blah blah blah, the new stuff that they do now. And then I've got that 4 terabyte NVMe. I wanted to make sure I was never going to run out of drive space. I don't need that much to run Docker apps, but if I'm going to do VMs and stuff like that, I just didn't want to have to worry about drive space. And don't get me wrong, I do run VMs on my personal computer as well, test stuff out, and my personal PC is plenty powerful enough where I could run Handbrake on it as well, but I just like offloading it to my Proxmox server, so I want to do that the same with CasaOS. And so now this small form factor didn't come with 48 gigs of RAM. It came with everything else though. It didn't come with the 4 terabyte NVMe, and it came with 16 gigs of RAM, so I added more RAM to beef that up. And the only reason why I did that RAM is because of the VMs that I might run and test. So let's go ahead and take a look at Casa, show you the apps that I'm running. Now I just want to say this really quick. If you're Casa or even ZimaOS, which I'm going to be doing a complete install to show how to set that up, set up RAID users. If you're a home user and all you want is something, a media file server, maybe a little bit more flexibility than that, ZimaOS is one of the easiest ways to go. Now I didn't need my CasaOS server to house data, so that's why I went with CasaOS and not ZimaOS, because I just wanted an app server only. That's the way I was treating Proxmox, was kind of an app server. Okay, so here I am at my Casa desktop, and I'm actually running this browser from the Casa server. So let me kind of explain something here. So Casa can run on any Debian distribution, whether it's a Debian server distribution like Ubuntu server, or any Debian desktop distribution. So I'm running this on Linux Mint. To run a server using a desktop is usually not done in the Linux world, but you know what? I came from the Windows world, and it makes it a little bit more convenient for me to run this on Linux Mint. Now, my file server is a TrueNAS server, so it does not have a GUI desktop, obviously, and you access that through a web GUI like you do with Casa here. And so keep that in mind. With CasaOS, there is some flexibility there. Now, does that mean I'm going to use this as a desktop computer? No, but there are my own personal reasons for doing it this way. Most Linux people are not going to do this. They're going to install Debian or Ubuntu server, install CasaOS, and run it that way. And again, this is just an app server for me. This is not a file server. Now, one of the reasons why they don't do that is because an update can sometimes mess up your GUI interface with Linux. Believe it or not, Linux distros can break when the update happens, just like Windows. It's just not as prevalent, but that's why a lot of people will do a backup before they run their updates. A system backup, not backing up their whole thing, just a system backup. So that's what's going on here. This is actually a Linux Mint background here that I have. And so now if you're going to notice, there's a little bit more RAM using here, and that's because I'm running a few things on here that we're going to talk about that normally aren't running on here. So normally the RAM usage wouldn't be that high. So like I said, when I was running Proxmox, I realized I really need more of a application server. I don't need to run a whole bunch of operating systems, but I will talk about VMs with CasaOS because I obviously do want the capability of running VMs on this server as well. Now, so let's just talk about some of the apps that I'm using. I don't have a lot of apps on here yet. I'm going to add a few more, but for right now, I just want to show you what I'm running on here. So, like I mentioned, I was running Plex before, so here's Plex installed. I actually have Jellyfin installed here. I'm going to make a video on, again, there's lots of videos on the difference between Plex and Jellyfin, but Jellyfin has come a long ways, and there are a few features still in Plex that aren't in Jellyfin. Whether those features would want you to keep on using Plex or not, I don't know, but for me, there's two features that Plex has. If Jellyfin would just put them in, boom, I'd be 100% Jellyfin. But at any rate, that's another video for another time. I am using Nginx so that I do have access to my file browser. I have access to Jellyfin. I'm doing port forwarding through Nginx for Plex. I'm not running Plex on a URL like I am Jellyfin and file browser. And just so you know, file browser is a really cool app. If you haven't seen it before, it allows you to access any files on your server. As far as my file browser goes, now I don't have this mapped to all the files on my server. I think that's kind of dangerous for file browser, because then you leave your server open, where if they did get in through file browser, man, that would really be a problem. And I don't have it set up like I had it set up on my Proxmox server yet. And so, but it's really kind of cool because you can set up different users. You can map to where their locations are for their files, and then as you as an administrator, you can have access to all their folders, but you can share files. It's kind of like Nextcloud a little bit, but a little watered down, a lot easier though. I think Nextcloud is, for a home user, is really overkill. This is where file browser comes in. I'll probably get a video on file browser, but here, this is my daughter. There's some pics in here. This is a picture of her playing basketball. She was playing college ball. She'll be playing college ball again, just not right now. But anyway, file browser just gives you access to, and you can access it through a URL outside your home. Give you a quick and easy access that way. I am running Portainer. I usually don't have it open, but I just wanted to show you here. And the reason why I'm running Portainer on here is because one thing that Casa doesn't give you, it doesn't allow you to see logs or anything like that. And so Portainer will give you more information about your Docker apps. And I may not, I'm probably use something else other than Portainer, but I just haven't got that up and running yet. And then Handbrake. I talked about how I do Handbrake. Now, and I want to show you too, again, this is only an app server only. I'm not saving any data to my Docker CasaOS server. It's all the data that I access from here is from my TrueNAS file server. And I'm going to show you a little bit how I've set that up. But before I do that, I've got a couple more apps down here. Duplicity, I'm playing around with Duplicity as a backup. Now this one doesn't work because it's beta, but because I'm running Linux Mint, I can install the app here and run it from the desktop and just set it up. And once it's set up, I won't have to worry about it. And from my Linux desktop, I can access this desktop as well through a program called No Machine. And so then I'm running SyncThing, because SyncThing it just syncs up all my videos and pictures from my phone to the file server, and then I can browse those with file browser as well. And so I use Watchtower for it, just to watch when I have updates. Now it doesn't update the Casa Docker apps. It just tells me when an update is ready. I don't run a ton of these. I don't run a ton of Docker apps. So I prefer to right now update them myself, and I guess the update doesn't really work real well with Watchtower in Casa, so I just have it set up to tell me when there's a new version out. I would prefer to right now install those, because there are some issues with Watchtower and updating the Casa apps. Okay, so really quick, I just want to mention DuckDNS. So as a home user, I don't think it's worth going out and buying URLs. I do have a URL for TechMadeEasy. I haven't done anything with it. I do have that reserved. I do have that bought. But most of the time, you can get 5 free URLs through DuckDNS. And so that's how I'm running Jellyfin, is through a DuckDNS URL and file browser through a DuckDNS URL as well. And that's why DuckDNS is installed here. And just so you know, I would subscribe if you're interested in this, because a lot of the YouTubers are leaving one of the steps out that makes it available for you to use it outside your house. I was actually surprised because it'd been so long since I'd set up used DuckDNS, because I had it set up on my proxy server with file browser, and then I was using again sync thing to sync my pictures over. So I'm gonna be doing a video on how to do that and how to use CasaOS to do that as well. So I just wanted to mention that. These are just a few of my apps that I'm running right now. Like I said, I'm going to add a few more, but I just wanted to show you. But now what I want to show you is I want to go into files for a minute here, and I want to just talk about. So in here, I have mapped my server folders. So this rip folder goes to my server, and this is when I'm ripping a Blu-ray or DVD. All of those ripped raw files go into this folder here on my file server. And so I've have it mapped into, so Casa uses this data folder to store their app data for their Docker applications. And then of course they have some default folders in here like documents, download, gallery, and media. So I've mapped my this is to my file server. So this is actually where all my files are stored, is right here. But so my rip folder is in a couple of folders down in here. So I have both of those mapped in here in case I need access to it from Casa, which most of the time I don't necessarily need to have my whole file server mapped here, because usually I'm on my personal desktop and it's already mapped on my personal desktop if I need anything from there. But you can do that if you have a file server and you want to access your files through CasaOS. You can do that. I just want to show you. Obviously, I'm not showing you how to set up in the FSTAB a Samba mapped connection in the FSTAB, but that's where these reside, is in the Linux FSTAB. So now let's just talk about Handbrake for a minute here. So with Handbrake, if I open Handbrake up here and I go here and I hit open source, then storage here is where all those folders were that we were looking at, and here is my ripped folder. Now I could, in Handbrake, I could map it just directly to this ripped folder, because that is where all of my video stuff is that I want to compress. But I have it just here in case there was something on here that I was going to compress for whatever reason. If there's something on my Casa desktop that is there, but I might eventually map it directly here, because I don't really need it. I probably won't really be compressing any files from these default Casa folders. Now compress is where any files that I compress with Handbrake goes into this compress folder. And if you want to know how that works with running this, now again, this is why I got a beefier servers, because I am using Handbrake to do my compression off of my Casa server. You don't have to do that, obviously, but again, that's one reason why I'm running it from here. At any rate, so now let's talk about VMs. Okay, it came from Proxmox. Do I have a need to run VMs on this server? Now, what I could do if I wanted to, I could run this virtual machine manager. Now, the problem is with CasaOS, and this is what's great. If you're new, if you're a Windows user and you're new and you don't know what this is, CasaOS, and I should have done this at the very beginning, it is a very easy way to set up a server, app server using Docker. Now, ZimaOS is one of the easiest way to set up a file server and a Docker server. And the difference with ZimaOS virtual machine is ZimaOS, it's already pre-installed, so you don't have to install anything. With this virtual machine, you have to install Virt Manager, QEM, and so on and so forth. Well, it didn't work for me because I'm actually using a different interface to run my virtual machines on here. and I don't know if it messed that up. I should have tested it first before I did that. So I'm running a program called Cockpit, and Cockpit is a GUI manager for a server, and Cockpit allows me to run to manage my VMs here, and so that's where, and I actually don't mind this. I like this interface a lot. The Cockpit does a lot of other things too, so I'm just using Cockpit for that. Now, if I want to run virtual machines, if for some reason I need to run a virtual machine, I can run a virtual machine two different ways. I can run it this way, or if it was working through Cockpit's virtual machine, I could do that as well. Or I could run VMware, and I do have VMware installed here, and I've got Windows running in VMware right now. Just so you know, VMware, it's really efficient at running Windows, very efficient at running Windows. Now, I'm not going to run Windows on my Casa server, but if there was something else that I wanted, well, okay, bottom line is, I was thinking about running Nginx in a virtual machine instead of on my in my Casa server itself. I really kind of wanted to separate Nginx from my application server, but all the searching I did or research I did, it didn't make it sound like it was going to be an advantage. And I even have a mini PC I was considering putting Nginx on and running it that way on that mini PC, but I just decided to run it from here, and I'm using Nginx as proxy for Jellyfin and file browser. I think I mentioned that at the beginning. But at any rate, so I was thinking about putting it in VMware. Now, the reason why VMware, so this is a difference. The nice thing about Proxmox is Proxmox was set up where you could do a bridge, and it would take it would use your house's IP address. Well, the problem is with this Virt Manager that's running on Linux, and I'm accessing it through the virtual machine manager in Cockpit, and it would be the same situation using the Virt Manager with Casa. Is it does not use your home's network, and if you try to do that, crashes because you have to do a lot of terminal stuff to get that to work, and it's a lot of steps for it to share your network in your house. Now, when you do create an app through these, or do create an operating system through these, that operating system can access your home network, but your home network cannot access that VM. But in VMware, when you can do a bridge, and now it uses. If I was to check out the IP address of this Windows, it'd be using my home network IP address. So if I needed to, if for some reason I needed to access this through a desktop, I could. But at any rate, that's just I don't want to bore you with that. But anyway, so I have those two options if I really want to run something. And right now I am running, so that's one of the reasons why this RAM usage is a little higher, because I am running KDE and I am running Pop! OS and Zorin OS. I just wanted to show you that really quick. And that's one of the reasons why this RAM usage is a little higher, is because I'm running that. And obviously I do have Windows running right here as well with VMware. So those other operating systems are on other virtual desktops. So here's Pop! OS. And so sometimes, I might use this occasionally just to test out a new distro. I could use my desktop for doing that as well. But I'm just showing you that, because you're installing CasaOS on any Debian-based distro, then you can set this up any way you want. So if you want to run a virtual machine on here, you can. through the different flavors of virtual machine. You can even put VirtualBox on here if you wanted to, but then you would have to set it up directly on the desktop unless you use something like No Machine to access that. But here's obviously KDE running here, and so really quick, I'm going to go to my personal desktop for a minute. Okay, so right now I'm on my personal desktop. Let's say I wanted to access obviously here's CasaOS that we were just looking at. This is on that Linux Mint CasaOS server, so obviously I have access to it from here. But I can actually use a program called No Machine, and here's my CasaOS server, and I can go ahead and launch into this. And now I actually have access to the whole desktop from here, if that's something that I wanted to do. Now, obviously, I'm just going to go back to here, and I'm going to minimize this. So, even though, like say, Duplicity isn't working right now as a Docker app, I could run it from the desktop here, set it up, and let it be running in the background. If I wanted to change something, I could use No Machine to access that if I wanted to. So this is my setup for right now. Like I said, I'm going to add a few more things in here. Again, this is only a few apps here, a few Docker apps that are running that I'm using right now. And but at any rate, I just wanted to show you that how people set up their own Docker server is up to them. You know, I mean, like I said, there's a lot of people, they have a ton of Docker apps. They use a different interface to even do that. The Casa interface for me right now is okay for what I'm doing. I don't need anything as fancy as that. But at any rate, this is TJ with Tech Made Easy. I hope that was helpful, enlightening. Have a great day. Thanks. Bye.
Now that was easy.